Warning: the following may cause your spine to tingle and may not be suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised.
I used to own a clockwork puppet. He was the best toy a kid my age could ask for. I called him Buddy. He did everything. He had a neat little suit, an expertly carved face, as well as a small area on his back for a clockwork key. His animatronics that followed the winding of the key were very simplistic, though, being a child, I found them very entertaining. Once you wound him up, the gears would click, almost as if they were resetting each time. His left eye would blink, his neck would click, causing his head to turn to the right, and his right eye would blink. I thought it was incredible that this toy seemed to be waking up from a long slumber. His torso would then twist from left to right, while his arms extended. The best thing about this toy was if you sat directly in front of him after performing a startup ritual, he will tilt his head to look directly at you. His mouth would open, and then would raise his hand as to say, "Hello." Buddy was my best friend for as long as I could remember. My mother got him for me when I was very young, from a flea market. Apparently the merchant there said that the toy was one of a kind, that the craftsman died shortly after creating him. The craftsman was well into his 80s, or so the merchant said, and fell ill immediately upon completion. The merchant also told my mother this interesting backstory about Buddy. He said that the craftsman had never fallen in love, which was sad. What was even sadder was that he longed for a son. So he pulled a Pinocchio and crafted this alluring puppet. I was kind of a shy child, as my mother could see, so she picked it up right away, and on my birthday, I received Buddy as a gift. I remember that day so vividly. I received a few clothes and a board game, but nothing I received really shocked and awed me. Don't get me wrong, I was very content with my gifts, but that was when I took my presents to my room. My mother had snuck Buddy in there when I wasn't there, and she placed him on my bed. I'll admit, when I first walked in, the sight of someone sitting on top of my bed caused me to jump, but my mom was right beside me to tell me it was safe. From that moment on, every day after school, I would rush home in hopes of seeing Buddy. Every night, I would talk to him about my day. It was all the best parts of having an imaginary friend, without him being imaginary. However, one night, things got slightly unnerving. Remember how I said that he was a clockwork puppet that required a wind-up key? Well, one night, I woke up to the sound of gears turning and rhythmic clicking. It sounded like Buddy's startup ritual. I refused to move from my bed. I had no idea what that noise was, nor was I dumb enough to go check. The sound abruptly stopped, and taking a deep breath, I quickly rushed back to sleep. The next morning, I got out of bed rubbing the sleep from my eyes. As I was making my way to the bathroom, which was directly outside my door, I greeted Buddy with a "Good morning." That's when I froze in mid-step. I have a small chair in my room, which was Buddy's chair, meaning I always kept him there when I wasn't playing with him. The reason that I froze was Buddy was sitting on the floor next to the door, with his back to the wall. I paused and looked at him. His expression was still as plain as ever. Looking back to my dresser, I noticed his wind-up key sitting untouched atop of it. I picked him up and placed him back on his chair. I got cleaned up, dressed, and decided that since it was the weekend, I would inspect Buddy a bit further. Setting him down on the floor, I winded him up and watched him very carefully. His startup was normal, except for one small thing. He wouldn't blink anymore. His head would just twitch to the left and turn to the right without blinking. I figured it was a faulty spring or maybe a loose gear. I was sitting directly in front of him, waiting for the final part of the wind-up phase. Once his torso finished twisting, he just stopped and stared directly into my eyes. I continued to wait for him to move his hand or open his mouth, but nothing. He just sat there. What was odd about him just sitting there was that I could still hear the gears turning, like he was thinking. I grabbed the key from his back and made my way to the dresser when I heard a very distinct click sound. I turned back and his eyes were angled towards me. This toy was actually staring at me from his place on the floor. I dropped the key and ran from my room in search of my mother. She was sitting in the living room reading a book. I told her what happened, and she said it must have been something wrong with the wiring or the gears, like I thought. She told me to put him in the closet and just not think about him for a while. Though, how could I not? He had been my only friend for as long as I could remember. How could I not think about him? Returning to my room, his gaze was straight, and the sound of gears had stopped. I wasn't going to be fooled so easily, though. I quickly picked him up and shoved him in the closet. That night, I lost my best friend. That night, I met my worst enemy. The day passed, and the night was slowly dragging into view. I refused to blink while looking at the closet. I knew he was just sitting in there, enjoying the fact that my fear was beginning to unravel my mind. Though as hard as I tried to fight it, the fatigue was growing. I felt my eyes become drowsy, my eyelids heavy. As soon as my eyes closed, I could have sworn I heard a click. Immediately, I opened them to find nothing out of the ordinary. Not taking chances, I got up from the bed and turned on the light. I approached the closet. All I wanted was to make sure he was still in there. Grabbing the handle, I paused, thinking to myself, there was no way he could be that fast. Letting go of the handle, I sighed to myself. Then I heard a noise which stopped my heart and caused me to freeze in place. It was that clicking that I've grown to despise. Now, I expected to hear this noise throughout the night, but the noise didn't sound from inside the closet. It sounded from right behind me. I felt my palms become sweaty, my throat tighten. This newfound fear that I was no longer safe in my own room quaked through my entire body. Mustering some courage, I spun around expecting to see those cold eyes directly in front of mine. Nothing. But he wasn't there. I began to ask myself if my mind was truly breaking, if I'd completely lost it. It was then I had to be sure he was still in the closet. Opening the door, he wasn't there. I slowly walked backwards, sat on my bed, and just stared at the closet with a pale face. But he wasn't there. That whole night, I simply rocked in place, checking the doors in every corner of my room. To this day, I still don't know where Buddy went to, and I don't know his intentions. But one year, when I was 16, I found his wind-up key in a box of old stuff. I was instantly rushed into a wave of nostalgia from my youth. I felt a smile creep onto my face. And then my jaw dropped as I remembered that terrible night. That terrible noise. I placed the key on my desk and went to hang with friends to get my mind off things. When I returned that night, as I sat down on my bed and my gaze dropped to my desk,